Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how to blend these three bracketed exposures in Photoshop using luminosity masks. We're also going to do a little bit of color correction and we're going to finish it up with some sharpening. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So we're in Lightroom right now, not Photoshop, because we want to prep these files to blend them in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and highlight all of them. So all of these exposures are now selected. And we're going to go down here on the right side, and we're going to go to Lens Corrections, make sure that tab is open, and remove chromatic aberrations and enable profile corrections. That's always something you should do with your lenses is enable profile corrections and remove chromatic aberration. It's just a no-brainer, really. So now what we can do is mess around with our basic panel sliders. So let's go ahead and deselect the both of these bracketed exposures, so we're only messing with our bright exposure. So there's not really much we want to do with this exposure except maybe bring the highlights down. That's all we really want to do. So I went down -41, and we're going to go ahead and move on to our middle exposure. This one actually looks pretty good so far, maybe a little bit too dark, so we're going to bring that back up. And we're not going to actually mess around with the highlights or the shadows because we want to use this to base the luminosity mask off of. So I only went up 0.44 in the exposure. Next, this one is actually pretty interesting in that we're going to match the exposure of the middle exposure and the dark exposure. If you don't understand what I mean, let's go ahead and actually show you. So this is dark right now. Very obvious statement. But what we're going to do is actually bring the exposure up about 2 stops, and just like so. So 2.08 stops. And you might be wondering, okay, you brought up the dark exposure 2 stops, now your highlights are blown. How are you going to fix that? Well, it's very simple. We still have all that raw data of the highlights, so what we can do is just go to our highlight slider and bring that down. Pretty snazzy stuff so far. And what we can do now is actually mess with the whites since our image is looking a little bit flat. So I'm going to hold down Option or Alt and then fix the whites by going a little bit. So about 21 is where we're going to be. And I think that's looking pretty good. Maybe a little bit of shadow boost, a little bit of a black boost. So I went up about 100 in the shadows and 98 in the blacks. So let's go ahead and actually bring up some clarity. 61 in the clarity. And we're going to go down to HSL. HSL is fun because you can mess around with the colors. So I'm going to mess with the luminance of the colors. So what we have here is our aquas and our blues. So that's our sky. And then we have our greens and yellows. That would be the foliage outside. So let's go ahead and mess with the blues. I'm going to bring those down, just like so. We're going to bring the aquas down. And we're going to bring the greens down. And we're going to bring the yellows down. So about -20 in the yellows, -40 in the greens, -30 in the aquas, -41 in the blues. That just gives us a better view outside. So it's a little bit more crisp and not so flat. So that looks pretty good. Now all we need to do, oh, you might be wondering why I did this. Well, with these exposures now basically being the same brightness, they're going to blend in a little bit better. So you might be wondering why do this? Why not just bring in the exposure as it is, like this? Well, it may work, it may not, but the exposures here are just too different to blend in seamlessly. So what we want to do is we want to match the exposures so they fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. So imagine if I'm trying to think of an analogy and I can't think of one. Never mind. So basically they fit together perfectly. You see how the exposure on, what are these things called? Trees? They don't change at all. between the different exposures. The only thing that's really changing are the highlights. So that's pretty cool. But you'd be thinking, okay, you brought up the exposure, now you got all this noise here. What are you going to do about that? Well, since we're taking only the highlights of this middle exposure with a luminosity mask, this is going to be completely dark in the mask. It's not going to take any of this grain. It's only going to take the highlight detail, which is very clean, very noise free. So that's pretty snazzy. So let's go ahead and look at the exposures, make sure they're all correct. And that's looking pretty cool. Let's go ahead and highlight all these by holding down Command and edit in Open as layers in Photoshop. So when we go about blending these, we want to use luminosity masks in a very advanced way. So we're going to be mixing in black and white adjustment layers along with curves, maybe an invert layer if we need to. But it's going to be pretty cool. We're going to learn a lot of stuff about it, about luminosity masks in this, I want to say episode, but not an episode, video. There we go. So let's go ahead and turn these two off. We're going to call this dark fix. And we're going to go ahead and go here. We're going to call this middle. And we're going to call this one bright. So what we want is pretty simple. We want the bright exposure to be on the top, our middle exposure to be on the bottom, and our dark exposure to be in the middle. So it goes from the top, bright, dark, middle. Let's go ahead and put some black masks on these. So holding down Option and selecting or clicking on this icon right here. So that's the Apply Mask button. We're going to do that to both of these bright layers and the dark layer. So now we're only working with this middle exposure, and we're going to use this middle exposure to really base all of our luminosity masks off of. We're not going to use the bright exposure because it's a little bit too bright, and we're not going to use the dark exposure because it's too noisy and too corrected. Not too corrected. It's basically, there's really no point because this one is just going to be a better selection because, of course, we have the blown out sky, so that's going to be perfectly white. We have the darker areas around these wooden floors, so that's going to be about black. So let's go ahead and actually do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to this little circle, and we're going to go ahead and bring in a black and white layer. And we're going to adjust the colors here. So I'm going to use this little hand icon, and I'm going to make this a little bit brighter. So I'm adjusting the blues to 159 for this example. And I want to make the floors a little bit darker, just like so. So about reds 172, negative 172. Is there anything else that I really want to do here? Maybe these trees are a little bit too dark. So cyans, interesting, cyans, not the greens. So maybe the greens in here. Yeah, those greens. Oh no, those were the yellows. Never mind. What's the greens then? Okay, there we go. It's this tree right here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We've adjusted the colors, and you can see, like, there it is. Okay, I don't know what I was trying to explain there. Creaky chair. Okay. Let's go ahead and bring in a curves layer. So now what we want to do is actually darken this by making a point here, brightening it, making a point there. So where am I at on this one right here? I'm bringing the shadows down to about the input level of 66 with an output level of 37. And for our highlights, which bring those up, about 193 with an output of 206. So that looks pretty good so far. So what we can do is go to our channels and go to RGB, hover over that, hold down Command, that brings up the selection option, and we're going to make a selection out of those. So we can go ahead and turn these off, and we're going to go to our dark fix layer. Make sure our brush is selected just by going over here, and I'm going to change the mode from overlay to normal, and we will start painting. So we're going to paint white on this black layer mask. And if you ever get distracted by these marching ants, just hold down Command and H. That'll hide them. They're still there, but they're just hidden. So, pretty cool stuff. I'm going to start over here by zooming in. I'm going to bring that down, just like so. And what is, oh, I'm on dissolve. That's why it's looking weird. So normal is the mode that we want to be in. So that looks good. That looks good. Put that in there. Those lights. You can see that view is coming back very nicely. Just like so. Bring in that floor. Bring in that highlight. Bring in that window. See how cool this is? Like, it's just insane. So that looks good. This needs to be brought in. I'm gonna put some over there as well, just so that the gradient is a little bit smoother. I'm gonna bring the hardness up just a little bit, because I know this area is a little bit weird with the fan, because the fan was moving. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna bring in more blue. I think we're bringing in too much. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, that looks good. This looks good. I'm gonna bring in a little bit more here. Maybe bring some right there just to fix that gradient. About some right there. Bring some in here. And we're gonna bring back this window and these highlights. Just like so. Bring in this highlight right here. So that looks pretty good. Yeah, that looks really good. Let's go ahead and Command D. That will deselect it. Let me just reveal those marching ants again. Command D, deselect. So now we're dealing with this. And I have a little bit of a fan here. So let's go ahead and bring in that brush. Make sure we're using black and paint that out. So this is looking pretty good for our highlights. As you can see, blending in those really well. I almost burped. Blending those in very well. Now we want to turn this off, bring these back, and we're going to take these points off just by clicking and moving them off of the little grid here. And we're going to go ahead and invert this. So we're going to bring this point up, and we're going to bring this point down. So now we're inverted. Next, we want to do, what we want to do is actually adjust the colors in our black and white layer. So I need this to be dark, and I need this to be dark, this to be a little bit darker as well, this to be more dark. I kind of want that to be about right there. Looking at the yellows right now. Yeah, that looks good. So here's what I went with. Magentas, honestly, barely touch them. There's really no point in adjusting the magentas if there's no obvious magentas in the scene. You may get like something that's really weird in magenta, like the table and the floor, but honestly, just leave it alone. Now what we can do is go to channels, RGB, hover over that, command, select, make that a selection, turn these two off, and we're gonna go ahead and turn our dark fix on, and we're gonna go ahead and start brushing. And I'm gonna use a pretty big brush. Make sure we're on white right here. Just hold down X will allow you to swap the foreground and background swatches. D will allow you to reset them. Mode, normal, opacity 100, and flow 100. Smoothing, 0. I'm using Wacom tablet, so this might be a little bit different if you're using a keyboard and mouse. So keep that in mind. So Command H, hide the ants, and just start painting. Let's go ahead and do that right there. I don't know what that accent was. Just like so. Bring the exposure up on that. Get that fan out of there. Paint some white right here. And this is looking weird over here. Okay, that looks a lot better. Maybe a little bit here. Now I typically use a bigger brush than this, just so it feathers out better. But I wanted to get that little detail in there. That's a little bit much. A little bit too much there. That looks pretty good. Okay. That looks good. Let's go ahead and deselect. Let's take a look. That looks borderline perfect. So now what we can do is do some color correction. Sweet. So I'm going to take care of these layers here. We can just delete these. So we're only working with our brackets. And what's interesting is the way we can do this. So we can do it very selectively. So let's go ahead and go select color range. And we're going to select blues. So you can see it's selecting all of our blues. I'm mainly looking at this floor right here because there's a lot of blue spillage here. Go ahead and press OK. It's going to say like, hey, there's less than 50% pixels are visible, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't matter. We're going to go ahead and bring in a curves layer because we don't really want to desaturate them, the blues. Let's go ahead and do that. And I just picked a blue right here just because it's a little bit more intense. That's going to change the blues in the floor. So let's go ahead and actually make this a little bit more visible. So we're going to bring our Okay, we're going to bring the white point in to about 227. Press OK. And that looks pretty horrible in some areas, but we're going to go ahead and group this by holding down Command G, making a black mask, and we're just going to target the areas that we want to target. So these areas here are a little bit funky. This area looks really weird. Just get that area a little bit more neutral. This whole table is funky. Just like that. Bring it in over here. About right there is two. Everything else look up. That area and this area. Okay. That looks much, much better. Much better. Okay. Let's fix the yellows. Because yellows right here especially look pretty intense. These are white cabinets. We want to make sure that they're actually white. So what we can do is go to select color range and select one of your brackets. Select one of your brackets. Go to select color range, and we're gonna go ahead and select yellows. Yellows is perfect. Now, what we can do is bring in a curves layer. I'm gonna bring this out of the group by moving it up. And we're going to go ahead and select our gray point picker. And we're going to go ahead and bring that in. So that's looking pretty good, and we can intensify this if we want, because it's a little bit too subtle. A little bit much. Let's actually adjust. Yeah. About there is good. Okay, that looks pretty good. But you don't want it everywhere, because then it's just gonna look too artificial. So let's group that. Put a black mask over it. And I'm mainly concerned about the ambient light that's in the kitchen. So it looks a bit funky. Put some over here, right there, right there. It's usually like these dark areas, or these areas that have like a lot of midtones, have that weird kind of yellow color cast. So let's go ahead and fix that. Okay. Much better. And I don't know why I'm deselecting, but that looks pretty good. Although this area and this area looks too dark. So let's go ahead and bring in a curves layer. Stop it. Okay, let's bring in a curves layer. And we're going to take that out of the group. I'm going to bring that up just like that. And we're going to apply it to the areas that we really want to apply it. So let's go ahead and do that. So that looks much better. Just like right there. About right there too. That looks good. Bring that up. That's a bit much. Bring some in over here. Okay. I'm getting a little bit of a halo here, so I don't want that. Okay. That looks pretty good. Is there anything else that we really need to do? Sharpening. That's what we need to do. Sorry if this tutorial is a little bit weird, because I'm a little bit out of order right now. So, sharpening. What we can do is this. We're going to go, let me put my pen down, Shift, Control, Option, E. Or is it Shift, Option, Command, E? Yeah, Shift, Option, Command, E. That'll create a merge visible layer. Now what we can do is we're going to change our image mode. We're going to change it to lab. And we're going to discard, actually no. That's not what we're going to do. We're actually, I know. This is something that I learned a little bit, long time ago. But what we can do is this. We're gonna merge visible, and we're gonna duplicate the merge visible layer, and we're gonna go ahead and go to Filter, Stylize, Find Edges. We're also going to go ahead and make this black and white, going to Adjustments, and what am I looking for? Desaturate. Okay, you might be thinking, okay, you're crazy. What are you doing? But this is actually pretty cool. What we can do now is we're gonna go ahead and blur this. Actually, let's go ahead and adjust the levels here. So about right there is good. About 97 in the black point. Now what we can do is go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're gonna bring that up to about 5, depending on the image. 5.2 looks good. And we're gonna bring in that black point again. Maybe bring in the whites. Yeah, that looks good. And it's still really weird. Like, what are we doing? Channels, RGB, command, make a selection out of that. And we're gonna remove this layer. Create a mask over this. So this is our mask. And we're having it on that layer. So now what we can do is go Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. Filter, okay. Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. We're going to zoom in here. And we're going to bring that up a little bit. I'm gonna go say like 80, 84, 90 maybe. But look at that. That is nice and sharp. Okay, now what we gotta do is fix these verticals because they're bothering the hell out of me. Let's go ahead and Shift Option Command E, and we're gonna fix these, and we can actually turn these off for now because we don't really need them on anymore. And we're gonna go ahead and make some guides. Oh, Command R gives you the ruler, and we're gonna make the guides. So I'm gonna put a guide here. I'm gonna put a guide right here. I'm gonna put a guide up here, and we're gonna put a guide down here. As you can see, our perspective is a little bit wonky, so we need to fix that. Hold down Command T, that'll bring in the transform tool, and we're gonna right click, left click, right click, yeah, right click, distort, and then we're gonna mess around with the distortion. So that area looks good, and this area looks much better now, but this area needs to be brought up. Okay, that looks good. This area needs to be brought down, and this area needs to be brought up again. I'm sorry, brought down. Interesting. So that looks pretty good. This area might need a little bit more tweaking. Yeah, that looks on. Okay, there we go. Get out of here, tip. There we go. That's what I would call a final image. That looks actually really good. I didn't think I would actually do a really good job. If you ever want to clear these guides, just go View and Clear Guides, and that'll clear the guides. So that's pretty much it. This tutorial was stupidly long. It's about half an hour. So let's go ahead and end it right now.